Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the second day of meetings, the first day of the MAG meeting. If we could all take our seats.
Miguel, Jorge.
Okay, thank you very much. Just a reminder, we're using the speaking queue, and you can get the link to the speaking queue on our front page, and also it's going to be put into the WebEx room. There's a transcript, and the meeting is being recorded, and it's going to be archived in YouTube. With that, I'll hand the meeting over to Lynn to start.
Thank you, and welcome back, everybody, to those that are participating online and that are here in the room. I think we had a good day yesterday, although we're still trying to find ways to improve the open consultation. So we will take on board a lot of the comments that were made yesterday and work that up into a recommendation for future open consultations. I think it's important that we kind of document that and leave it as a record, as this is our last physical face-to-face MAG meeting and our last physical open consultation this year. But we'll make sure that those comments and other suggestions for improvement are taken forward. I'm actually going to keep my remarks really short today. We'll hit the next 2 days are really fairly serious working sessions, both in terms of finalizing the program and specifically one of the larger pieces of work is focused on the main sessions. I think Dennis from Endesa has some opening remarks, as does Dr. Brunstrup. So we will turn to those, and then we will come back and move into the agenda. Before I do that, though, we should approve the agenda. So the agenda, again, has been posted for some time. The only change from the agenda that was posted is that we are moving the best practice forum session that we didn't get to yesterday to the slot that starts at 10:30 this morning. So we will do that, and then we will move into the larger set of discussions. Are there any comments, suggestions, or any requests for AOB? Benny?
It's in the AOB section. It's June 6th today, and it's a special day for one of the members of the MAG. So I think we need to give her credit and wish her a happy birthday. It's Susan.
Happy birthday, Susan. Any other suggestions, edits, AOB? If not, I'll move that the agenda is approved and wait a short time to see if there are any objections. Not seeing any, I'll call the agenda approved, and we'll immediately move to Dr. Brunstrup for some opening comments.
Thank you very much, Lynn, and good morning, everybody. I hope you took advantage of the summer night in Berlin yesterday, because this night the weather will be quite stormy and rainy, so you get the full range of the continental climate in Berlin these days. Maybe just one reflection from my side. When I thought again a little bit what we have heard yesterday during the open consultations, I reflected a little bit on the question of how could we strengthen the IGF, because that's what we would like to do. And some mentioned yesterday that, the unique selling point of the IGF is that it is an open, multi-stakeholder discussion forum. And indeed, that's true in my view. And equally true is that there are a lot of other bodies who are dealing with internet governance issues. We heard about that yesterday in the evening. And there are also a lot of, and maybe increasing, decision-making bodies on internet governance issues. I'm personally involved in the G7 and G20 discussions. There is a G20 meeting upcoming this weekend, which is also dealing with internet governance issues. And the question that was raised yesterday and that I have also in mind is how can we make sure that we bring the discussions and solutions we have inside the Internet Governance Forum to these other bodies and especially to the decision-making bodies. So when we discuss today the program of the IGF, maybe it's good to have that in mind, how we can bridge this gap that I also see, and how can we transfer our discussion outputs in a way to these other bodies. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela, and I agree very much with your observations, and hopefully we'll keep that in mind as we actually progress through the next 2 days' work. Dennis?
Good morning, everyone. Deniz Susar from UNDESA. I just want to make a short statement as well, because most of the things were said yesterday during the open consultation. So maybe 2 things to highlight. We have made the official announcement yesterday, the formal announcement about the next host country. So our Undersecretary General accepted the offer from Poland, and we will be working with colleagues from Polish government in the next months to start planning the next meeting in 2020. And the second thing is, I think most of you know about the report of the high-level panel on digital cooperation, which will be launched on Monday. And when the report is handed over the Secretary General, the mandate of the task team will be over. But there will be a small team in the SG's office to do the consultations and follow up with the recommendations. And also on Monday in New York, there will be a briefing to member states in the afternoon. So I think those are the updates from me, Lynn, so I can hand it over to you.
Thank you, Dennis. What we've tried to do is make sure that there was a little redundancy between the introductions that were made yesterday and here today, with the position that it's more important that we actually make a lot of the formal announcements in the open consultation where the community is actually participating fully. So there were more fulsome announcements and more fulsome introductions yesterday, and the Polish government was thanked very much for their interest and application in hosting the IGF, and just go briefly on record here with the thanks as well, but that was covered quite thoroughly yesterday, as was, of course, continued appreciation for the German government for all of their support for the IGF this year, for the MAG, and certainly for some of the extra activities as well with respect to supporting, in particular, participation from the Global South. So with that, I think we'd like to get right to work. The first item is a briefing on the state of preparations for the annual meeting by the host country, where they have particular responsibility for items such as the high-level leaders meeting, the parliamentary meeting, and the opening sessions. So we'll turn the floor to Rudolf Griedel. Rudolf, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much, Lynn. Concerning the high-level leaders meeting, we are on a very good track. The invitations to the ministers from our minister have gone out 2 weeks ago through the permanent representation at the United Nations in New York. So all countries should have received the invitation by now. The business leaders have been contacted worldwide also by letter from our minister a little bit later, perhaps 1 week ago, 10 days ago. So concerning on where these leaders are located, they might have just received the invitations. One thing that is important, in the letters that were sent out, there were some very challenging dates for reply, the 31st of May. This is due to the whole process of drafting a letter, getting it signed by the minister, getting it then to the perm rep and so forth. So these are no exclusion deadlines. You can still, of course, confirm, or your ministers or your leaders can still confirm also at a later stage, and we would be glad and happy to receive as many of the leaders here as possible. On the track technical community and civil society, the invitations will go out very soon. We are planning to have this session during the whole morning and a little bit into the afternoon of day 0. So that will be from the morning until after lunch. And we, after having heard many of you and having a lot of input from the stakeholders, we now are heading towards some plenary segment, and afterwards having discussions not stakeholder group by stakeholder group, but issue by issue, the 3 themes: data, inclusion and security. I'm shortening the titles, but in a multi-stakeholder format, so that the high-level stakeholders could discuss amongst themselves and then come back to the plenary and take stock. Of course, there will also be the possibility to have bilateral talks in the margins. For all of them, there are enough spaces available. We have, I think, in total 11 rooms for bilateral talks throughout the whole IGF. So whenever people feel the need to have a bilateral talk with anybody else, they will most probably find time and space to have a quiet and thorough discussion. This is perhaps for the high-level segment. The parliamentary meeting, which is the second issue on the agenda here. You heard a lot of it already yesterday from Mr. Jatzombeck. The Parliament is in the process of drafting the invitations. I hope that they will go out quite soon. And we are assisting the Parliament, but of course it is within the domain of our legislators to decide on whom to invite and how to invite. We are very eager to have a broad representation of parliamentarians, and that's why, together with UNDESA, we have set aside a certain amount of the fund that we have put to the availability of the DESA for the Global South dedicated to parliamentarians. So there will be a parliamentarian travel expenses fund, and so that we will have a broad representation from all over the world. It will take place on day 4 in the morning. It will be in the form of we hope that it would be in the form of a main session, because we would need to have the full translation for this session, supposedly, and of course, and this is true for the parliamentarians and the high-level representatives. They are all being invited to the whole IGF. They are being invited for their dedicated sessions, but also to assist other segments, other parts of the IGF, so that they feel welcome and that they can spend as much time in interesting sessions as possible. That brings me to the opening sessions that will take place in the afternoon of day 1, because of the availability of the Chancellor. There will be an opening segment with the Chancellor, and we do not know yet which high-ranking other high-ranking representatives from stakeholder groups. We're still hoping for the Secretary General of the United Nations to assist and come to Berlin as he did in Paris, and we are counting on the support of our colleagues in the UN system to make this possible. After this first opening segment, there will be time and space to have 2 or 3. We do not yet know exactly 2 or 3 high-level panels that should perhaps be centered around the 3 themes, perhaps also around other issues, and should be, in our view, diverse and give a good representation of the whole IGF community, geographically, gender-wise, and also all the other diversity aspects. That is very important to us. That sums up for the moment the state of the plannings. Happy to answer your questions, to receive any comments from you. Lynn, over to you.
Thank you very much, Rudolf. The floor is open for questions or comments. Maybe while we wait to see if anybody has any comments, I have just a sort of a couple of questions maybe on the high-level leaders meeting in terms of making it really beneficial and feel that there's an intent from us to them. I'm wondering if it would be possible to do even just a high-level presentation of the 3 thematic working groups, maybe following something like even the flow charts, and maybe something that quickly identifies the sort of major policy questions that are coming up through each one of those flow charts, so that there's something sort of substantive that could then feed into those 3 separate working groups that you have. And maybe there's even a package of materials that could be prepared from the various workshop sessions and any of the background papers that could be provided to them as well. So again, that they really understand that, you know, we hear often the IGF is a talking shop. It's not a talking shop. There's a great deal of substance in it. So maybe there's a way to expose a little bit more deeply the discussions that are taking place in those thematic working groups over the 2 days. And I don't know if there's even an opportunity to maybe have as a suggestion or a request. These are some of the topics that would be really helpful if they were discussed in those 3 separate groups, and that could then feed back into the IGF itself. Just something to make a substantive link between those 3 breakout sessions, for lack of a better word, that you've scheduled, and the work of the IGF that's taking place over the next 4 days. I don't know what you had sort of envisioned for how they would be structured or moderated, but I think there's a lot of information we could actually provide, and really with a focus on trying to tie those together. Let me just leave that there and go to the queue. We have Nebojša. Nebojša, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Nebojša Regoje, MAG-MEB government grouping. Obviously, hosts are doing very well, and I congratulate for all these efforts. I have one really practical question when it comes to the invitations that Rudolf mentioned that have been sent. If they are sent to a specific ministry, if they are sent to the executive body, or if they are sent to just on the name, perhaps, or how was, so that I can actually track it, where is it, and to see if it reached really a person who would be interested. Thank you.
As in many countries, there are many ministers claiming the responsibility for, let's say, digital issues. We could not, as a host country, decide which of those ministers we want to invite. So what we did was really to have an invitation, a generic invitation to the countries with a verbal note from our from our mission, specifying that this invitation was for the minister in your country responsible for digital issues, so no name. And then upon the mission in New York and the Foreign Office in your countries to distribute it to the relevant ministry. So the way would go through the mission in New York to the Foreign Office, and from there to the responsible ministry.
Christina, or Christine, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. This is Christina Arida, speaking on behalf of the Egyptian government, former host of the IGF. I have a couple of questions. First, I appreciate all the information that was provided on the high-level leaders meeting and the parliamentarian session and the opening. I wanted to know whether the high-level leaders meeting is going to feed in a way into the IGF in a sense. So are we expecting like some points to be taken up to maybe the high-level panel after the opening on on day one? Also, I think it is important that we keep the format of a discussion so that we do not have statements read, because I think we've passed that, and I think this will be most important. If we have really a dynamic discussion in the room, we might get more out of it. One other thing about the parliamentarian session, so in order for people from the Global South to be able to go for the funding deadline, I think the invitations need to come out in due time if possible, to be able for us to mobilize in our countries the parliamentarian to actually go for this and go for maybe for applying for the funding. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much. We definitely want a dynamic discussion and some vivid, lively format. Not a readout of 100 statements in a row. We definitely don't want to go down this road, and that's why we thought these breakout sessions in a multi-stakeholder format would be a good idea, because then you have automatically you get a little bit out of this let's say classical United Nations reading out statements after statement format. You have a more diverse panel with people from the civil society who are used to, spark discussions. Ministers can come in, business representatives as well. So we will also try and make sure by giving specific, let's say, roles to specific persons in these settings. Let's say antagonist positions, for instance, like two positions starting, and then a discussion can come from that. We can at the moment not yet specify much more, because we do not yet know exactly who will be the persons in the room, but that's definitely the idea. And of course the idea is also to bring the discussion or to feed into the IGF, and that's why we thought at the end of these breakout sessions there will be 1 or 2 persons per, or even more. We will have to see. It's kind of wrapping up the sessions and being rapporteurs to first the plenary of the high-level meeting, but then again, once this is done, we could easily and should easily feed these results into the IGF discussions. And the parliamentarians, yes, I see the point. We'll have to talk to DESA to adjust to the invitations. That's an important point. Yeah.
Thank you, both Christine and Rudolf. Natasha, you have the floor.
Hello, everyone. My name is Natasha Glover. I come from a government stakeholder group from Croatia. I have one question. You mentioned that there will be 2 or 3 high-level panels organized, probably focused on 3 themes. I wonder whether those teams are the conference teams, like digital inclusion and safety, security, stability, resilience, and what was the third one? The data management, data governance, or those are some other themes that will be decided yet?
Thanks for asking. There will be some kind of overarching theme for the plenary, that is, where is the internet going? So looking back 30 years of World Wide Web and 20 years of internet governance structures, and looking to the future, what is it about the open, free, inclusive, human rights-centered internet? So that's an overarching question that will be discussed, but the breakout sessions will be along the lines of the three themes that we have identified here. I was just shortening them by saying data inclusion and security, but in reality it's data governance, inclusion, security, safety, resilience, and something else, stability. Yeah.
Thank you, Natasha and Rudolf. Miguel, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, everybody. Again, thank you to the government of Germany for having us here and in such style. I feel very, very comfy here. Thank you very much for that. It's a small question regarding the high-level segments or the panels. How do we envisage the participations of the ministers that may come? We are inviting ministers from all over the world, and in my experience, I'm Miguel Candia, a government MAG member, and I should have started by that. Sorry, for the record. In my experience, the ministers normally ask you what are they going to do when they travel, and it's better to have a proper answer, such as you will be a part of something. And then the question is easy. How do we envisage that in the sense of giving some participation to as many people as possible in the high-level rank? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for this question. That's not only a question of ministers, it's also a question of CEOs and high-ranking representatives from other organizations. We will try to organize this meeting in a way that every high-ranking person gets a role. I can't tell you more at the moment because we have to adjust, but of course, people of this stature, they need an active role and they will get it. I can't tell you what exactly, but they will get it.
So this is where the German government gets extremely busy over the next few months, and that we've gone through the workshop submission. And will people consider whether or not there are any more questions? If I can just come back again to the high-level leaders meeting, because this is a really significant opportunity. We have not had the high-level leaders meeting the last 2 years because of the timing. They both would have been on a Sunday. One of them was not really possible in Geneva, and last year there were competing events with the Paris Peace Forum and the Centennial Observation and that sort of thing. So this is a really an opportunity to really kind of set a new bar and a new process. And there's two kind of threads I'd like to pick. One is, I think it would be a really good opportunity for the IGF community to do some marketing materials that make it clear what all the component pieces of the IGF ecosystem are. So we could obviously put things in about the NRIs, we could put things in about the BPFs, we could talk about the CENB, Connecting and Enabling the Next Billion, 4-year major intersessional policy project that we had. But with a view to, I mean, I'm not looking at a huge compendium, but with a view to talking about kind of the significant activities we've done, and I think we could also maybe start up a kind of crowdsourced database of all the anecdotal evidences of where something that happened at an IGF event or process actually fed into another substantive part of a discussion we had yesterday. But I think that would rely on the IGF community to pull that set of materials together. Of course, the question always then is we need resources to pull it together and sort of funding to present it. But maybe there's even an opportunity to do something, if I understand part of the proposal yesterday, which there was maybe some funding that supported kind of a Wikipedia awareness thing around the IGF. Maybe there's a way to pull some of these together and take some of those kind of resources and funds and support multiple efforts with them. They're both trying to collect the same information and the same, sort of profile of what we're doing, and also focus on impact. So I'd just like, any other kind of comments or thoughts on, whether or not that's of interest, is it possible, better ideas. And then secondly, really would like to come back, and we didn't have time to discuss this beforehand, but I think we're really well aligned in terms of really wanting to make the discussions in those 3 breakout groups of the high-level meetings really substantive. What we hear all the time from senior level policymakers is, what difference is the IGF making? What am I taking away from it? What have I just gained or learned? Or how substantive has this discussion been that I've just participated in? What's it going to impact? What's it doing? What's it helping? If we could find some way to understand what some of the key topics were, focus them on maybe a couple of key policy areas with, again, some supporting papers beforehand that kind of informs the discussion, provides enough leadership that hopefully we have a concrete discussion, but not one that restricts, whatever might come up in the meeting or there. But that also is going to require some preparation, and clearly it would require support from the German government. It would also require support from MAG members, particularly those that were engaged in the, deeply in the thematic working group preparations, because we would be looking for you to say it would be really helpful or would really help tie together the discussion if we'd had a discussion on this particular topic ahead of the week. Or so again, I just throw that out. I'm really trying to some of your comments earlier, Daniela, which is, how do we actually improve the IGF? How do we respond to some of the suggestions we're getting for improvements? And we all think there's a lot of really good knowledge and value that comes out of the IGF. So how do we actually make that known to them, and how do we actually have that group of people feel that they are participating deeply and contributing to the work of the IGF? Because I think that will engage them for the future. And it can't just be another discussion and another set of panel discussions and things, because I don't think that's going to move it to the next step. Something, Danielle?
Yes, thank you, Lynn. In fact, that's a little bit what we thought as well, and that was also one of the reasons why we changed a little bit the idea that we had before, because we thought that it would make sense to show and feel the high-ranking politicians how important it is to have that multi-stakeholder approach. And that's why we try to bring together to the breakout sessions the different stakeholder groups, and then discuss in depth policy questions around the 3 themes that we have circled around now. And what we are trying to do is indeed to have papers in advance with policy questions, so to let people know. But we are still working on that, and we are getting help already, fortunately. So that's the idea. And but when we know better who is really coming, then that will make things easier as well.
Just want to underline too that it's a high-level leaders meeting with leaders from all the stakeholder groups. So this isn't focused just on governments, but it's also, if we get high-level private sector in and high-level civil society and high-level technical community, they also, I think, have the same considerations.
We even call it in our internal papers the high-level multi-stakeholder meeting.
Right.
So you could replace leaders by multi-stakeholder then.
And that, I mean, either one is fine. I think they're both excellent. Miguel, was that an old hand up, or were you looking for the floor again? Any comments, reflections? Good idea, bad idea, too much work? You all have a lot of coffee in front of you, so there's no excuse for silence. Okay, well, so let's leave that discussion there then, and I think there's probably a request also for within DESA to really understand what kind of resources we might be able to marshal to support, in particular, some of the, what I would call kind of some of the outreach activities. But I think it would be great if we had, you know, a really sort of sleek, concise document that talked about the various pieces of the IGF ecosystem, but talked about it not just from a here's what all the pieces are and what their charter or mission is, but really some concrete examples of some of the impact and things. So if we could get the resources from within the community, maybe even with some potential contributions from some organizations to support that effort, would really be looking possibly for some additional support from DESA as well. I don't know what's there in terms of maybe printing or materials. And not mean to put you on the hook now, but maybe if you can just just keep that in mind.
Sure, we are ready to support, I think, and outreach is, as you know, also one of the things that we discuss with IGF Secretariat in our regular meetings every week. So we are ready to support, and we had a great collaboration with the German mission and with Rudolf's team for the side event. We have printed these brochures, and I think we reached out to some diplomats in New York, and we should continue. So we are ready to support. And one idea was maybe in the coming months to get some intern to help us only with this task and until the meeting. So yeah, and also based on our discussions, if needed, maybe we could also bring like an individual, a support, a consultant for that. So that's also on paper.
No, thank you. And I'm sure there are a few community members that would be helpful, be very interested in helping to review any of those materials as well, and ensure that we're picking up, all the key points too. So if we can help provide some additional support, if you do bring in an intern, I'm sure you'll find support for that. Well, let's move to the next item then, which was the best practice forum discussion from the previous day. And there what we wanted to do was to have brief updates on the best practice forums and their current status. And then, of course, with every discussion here, are there things we should consider that could further strengthen them or further extend their impact? We might also keep in mind the fact that we have a number of main session slots to fill, so if there's anything that's triggered out of these discussions that would be worthy of a fuller outing, that this might be some kind of right territory for that. Who wants to go first? Otherwise, we'll go in the order of the agenda. So Ben is putting his hand up to go first. Ben Wallace, you have the floor.
Thank you, Lynn. So not in alphabetical order, but in hand order. I'm the MAG co-convener for the Best Practice Forum on Cybersecurity. So I'll just give an update on how far we've got with the work this year and the direction we're headed as we work towards the annual meeting in November. So just to recap, the aim for this year is for the BPF to identify best practices related to the implementation of different elements that are contained within various international agreements and initiatives on cybersecurity. So that could be picking out particular principles or policy approaches that we see within a number of different international agreements. The BPF is following an approach that it took last year of developing a background paper which will be provided as a reference document alongside the call for contributions, and then also included as part of the final report. And there's a volunteer group working on this paper that's working to identify and analyze relevant initiatives and agreements, and then seeking to find horizontal or overlapping elements, those that appear in more than one agreement, that could be the focus of our work this year. That background paper is splitting the agreements into 3 buckets. So there are agreements that are made within individual stakeholder groups, such as the Cyber Tech Accord, which is an industry initiative, or the various directives and declarations that are made by regional groupings of governments. There are agreements struck across multiple stakeholder groups, so obviously the Paris Call is one of those. And we heard from Wolfgang yesterday, the GCSC, the Global Commission on Security in Cyberspace, which has its own package of norms. And the third bucket are those UN initiatives that we've also been hearing about, the OEWG and the GGE. And that was something that the MAG, when I put the proposal for the work this year, MAG members asked that the BPF look in particular at those and make sure those are included. And we're conscious that the work in those 2 areas is just beginning, but we're definitely finding a way to include those in the work being done this year. We've also established a separate volunteer group to understand how legal frameworks support or underpin agreements and initiatives, and also the extent to which national and regional cybersecurity strategies mention the applicability of international law to cyberspace. The call for contributions will be put out later this month, as well as being targeted broadly to the intergovernment's community as normal. There are a few specific groups that we will target directly. We will try and reach out to the organizations behind the agreements and initiatives that we've identified in our background paper, and as well as the signatories to those agreements and initiatives, because we're interested whether they've identified best practices for fulfilling the commitments in those agreements, and also whether there are any mechanisms in place for keeping track of the extent to which their signatories have acted in response to the commitments. Another group we're interested in getting input from is the NRIs, and we've just started exploring with the Secretariat the best way that we might do this. The drafting of the BPF report will take place over the summer, once the call for contributions has concluded. And then we will reconvene the BPF in September to discuss the draft report, as well as planning the session that we're going to be holding at IGF 2019. The aim is to publish the draft report in early October, about 6 weeks before the IGF meeting, to give the community time to reflect and consult internally on the draft report before coming to Berlin and providing any final views on it there during our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Are there any comments or questions? Carlos?
Good morning, Carlos Afonso. Maybe I can speak a bit about the BPF on local content. We are trying, as you probably know, not only to emphasize creation and the formative aspects of producing content, but also preserving content. And this understood in the most general sense of preserving material and immaterial historical assets of all kinds, medias of all kinds, etc., archives, etc. And we have very little activity so far in the list, but we are having, outside of the list, some activities, and I can say that the Latin American IGF, which will happen in August, will probably open a session to discuss the local content creation and preservation. And we are in dialogue with them to organize this. The Brazilian IGF in October will also use the information from this BPF to discuss the theme as well. We have now about 26 or 30 members in the mailing list, but it's very little activity. I hope that it picks up in the next few weeks, because we have already accumulated some experiences which can be posted in the list and stimulate the people to bring their experiences as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. I mean, I think it's a really important area. I know when Carlos first triggered this, it was based on the very sad state of a fire in Brazil, which had destroyed much of the National Museum, and so there's a really real imperative to doing this work. So,
may I? The incredible thing is that one of the richest persons in Brazil, among those guys with billions of dollars, donated about $50 million to reconstruct Notre Dame, and donated 0 cents to reconstruct the National Museum.
Carlos, you may want to, maybe we can just go back with the secretary to make sure they correct the transcript here, because there were a couple of indiscernibles. Are there any comments or questions on the local content? Carlos, is there anything you or the other leaders need from this MAG in terms of perhaps increasing the activity in the working group, in the BPF?
Yes, the case is of a very rich family in Brazil. I can't nominate because of Chatham House rules. And the church in question is Notre Dame in France. Okay? Let's see if it appears okay. The case in question is Notre Dame.
We'll do it offline. I think you're saying that it was a sad state because, in fact, the donation wasn't made to reconstruct the National Museum, which was damaged through a fire in Brazil. But again, that was part of the imperative of triggering this BPF in the first instance. Carlos, is there anything you're looking for from the MAG in terms of helping this BPF be a little more active or advance the topics?
Probably would be very helpful to have yet another facilitator, because I know that Giacomo of the EBU is very busy, and it's not easy for him, and even for me, given the work we have in our countries and organizations, to pay more attention to that. Another facilitator would be very, very helpful.
And of course, the BPFs are not restricted to MAG members. They are community, and in fact are meant to be a great vehicle for actually reaching out to other organizations and get them engaged in specific issues that matter to them, whereas maybe they might not have think or might not have been immediately attracted to internet governance as a topic. So I would ask MAG members to please spend a few minutes and think about whether or not there are any other organizations that you think would be deeply interested in this BPF and would actively participate and support it, and or whether or not you would recommend any other potential leaders or participants in the BPF. And we closed out of the security BPF quite quickly as well. I think the same thing goes there. If people are aware of organizations that you think would be interested in the work, that would be interested in participating or supporting the work, then please let the leaders in the BPF know. Again, these BPFs had several objectives. One was certainly to allow very substantive ongoing work to happen on a small number of important consequential topics. And then second, it was a great opportunity to pull in other people that maybe had more narrow interest than, again, perhaps might initially be attracted to the subject of internet governance. So it's a great opportunity for people and organizations that are engaged in these issues to really engage in an effort that's very concrete, really tangible, specific deliverables, and has a really valuable, useful deliverable at the end. So please spend a few minutes and think through your own networks and contacts, and let's do what we can to further strengthen the BPFs. We have BPF on gender and access. Would you be willing to go next? And then Internet of Things, Big Data, and Artificial Intelligence is coming, so just make sure that everybody's ready. Is it Chennai, you're going to speak on the gender and access?
Yeah.
Excellent, thank you.
Morning, everyone. So I will be speaking on behalf of the BPS for Gender and Access with my co-chairs being Raquel and Maria. And so far we've had, I think, about 2 or 3 calls with the community working on the BPF on gender. And our main focus for this year is going to be specifically looking at gender and access, what happens after access, specifically for the inclusion of women into the digital economy. Thus far, we've worked on picking out what the different topics of the main session would be at the end of the day for the BPF. Looking, for example, we've looked at trust in terms of internet access to the internet and the risks offered, as well as the participation in the digital economy and the future of work, and the skills that are needed to ensure that from a gender perspective, people would be able to optimally participate in the internet ecosystem. Our main aim, of course, is to come out with policy recommendations that will be taken on board going forward. In terms of engagement, we've looked at specific outreach working with the HLPDC and other UN agencies, and also looking into the women's groups that have worked on economic growth and output, as well as trying to map the stakeholders that would be going forward. And one of the questions that had been raised from the constituency, which if it's not already been communicated to us, or would have been the consultant for the BPF who would be working on the project, just an update, that was the requested update from their side. But I think all is well from our side, and we will probably be putting out a call for volunteers as well to be part of, from the IGF community, and potentially working with the working group on outreach and engagement as well, to get more people to participate in the BPF on gender and access. Thank you.
Thank you, Chennai. Are there any comments, questions, suggestions? Or Chennai, is there anything you'd like to ask the MAG or the community for in terms of further support?
Yeah, I think, so the first question that had been around the consultant, that's just to get an update on that, but I think in terms of the MAG, across the different working groups and the dynamic coalitions, to actually see if there's an opportunity, in particular, I think maybe with the BPF that's working on AI, because we will be looking at the future of work and what it means for women to from a gender perspective, to participate in a vastly automated economic growth situation. And also if there's anyone who would be interested from contributing from the different stakeholder perspectives. The gender issue does affect everyone across the different boards, so I think it would be great to get different input. And I think our main focus is really looking at it from an after access perspective, which I think impacts on everyone. What happens when you're actually connected, and how does that enable you to participate, and what are the risks, and what are the risks that one is likely to face that would impact negatively on participating, which I think works well very much into the theme that has been the theme that the meeting will be running on, one net, one vision, one world. What does it really mean from a gendered perspective to be participating in that one net, one world, one vision?
Thank you, Chennai. Let me ask Changatai if he does have an update on the consultants, which is what was requested.
One has been, the contract is signed, so one is working already. The other consultant, oh, sorry, that's with the, sorry, which group is that? The security group, right? Yeah, security. And for local content, access and gender, we're still going through the paperwork. We had a little bit of difficulty because the consultant that we wanted was already in the UN system doing another project, so we had to wait for that to finish and that to close out. So that's done now, and so she should be on board before the end of this month. Yeah.
Let's hope so. That would be halfway through the year.
Yes.
Having got an early start on the MAG last year, to be, appointing consultants 6-7 months later, we need to find a way to move that process forward.
No, this one was a bit, because the UN is, you can't have two contracts in the UN system, and a contract is even travel. So if you're traveling to a conference, you can't be hired for anything else, so it's a quirk of the UN system. So
can I just push back and say there are always reasons? It still doesn't resolve the fact that it's many, many months later and we're still without a consultant for 3 of the BPS, which are some of the most significant output that we do. So if we can just think through the process a little bit and see what we can do to move it forward next year, I think that would be helpful. We can't change the rules, but then we can change the consultants. If the difference is we get a consultant in 6 months earlier because we get somebody else in, that's a different solution to the same process. I'm not suggesting we change the UN rules. I'm suggesting we actually pay attention to the timing of our own processes here, and we launch appropriate kind of consultant and engagement processes to get people in time. We're now in the process of maybe they'll be here by the end of the month for 3 out of our 4 BPFs, just at the start of the summer period in the Northern Hemisphere with an IGF coming up soon. So we need to find a way to get ahead of these processes. Every year it's a late appointment. So again, I'm not suggesting we change UN rules. I'm suggesting we revisit our process for engaging consultants and find a way to get them in earlier in the year. Maricela, you have the floor.
Thank you, Lynn, and good morning, colleagues. I just wanted to congratulate Shania and the group for the fantastic work that they are doing. And since we have been talking about building bridges, I was just curious about whether you have been able to establish contact with this special group that works within ITU on gender issues and closing the gender digital gap. They also work with the Trade Coalition and UN Women and others. So it will be fantastic to establish also links with their work and the work they have been able to advance, and see if we can make it more visible, and also see if those outcomes can also help us strengthen and enhance our work And as a MAC member, I just would like to humbly concur with your comments, Lynn, regarding the need to speed up certain processes so we have the adequate support for substantive discussions on time and in a manner that we are able to basically gain, the advice and the important support that we, thought we will have in a timely manner for our work as well. I think that's super important. So I just wanted to add my voice to that recommendation and feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Maricela. I think you're talking about the ITU Equals group, which I don't know if anybody from the BPF wants to talk to that, but I know we have worked with them in the past. Raquel, did you want to come in? Or Chennai? I can't see back that far.
Thank you so much, Marcela. So with the Equals group, I think some of us have either in our individual organizational capacity have actually engaged with them, and I think they could be part of the PPF, but Raquel could confirm. So definitely there's contacts there as well with I think it's called She Trades from the World Bank, especially if we're looking at the future of work. We've also I think individuals have engaged with them, so they'll definitely like to come on board and cross the bridges. And I think one group that's specific also is the WIEGO that has done a lot of work of women in the informal sector and in trade and economic growth. So, and they haven't exactly participated in these spaces. So of course that's once again like crossing over a bridge that I think in the beginning it was about bringing in other people that are not necessarily participating in the internet space, but are actually dealing with the issues that are cross-cutting. So I think that's definitely something that the group is thinking about. And we are also going to be working with the Feminist Internet Research Network that was set up by APC and IDRC, so that we also have that different perspective within the group. So it's got a lot of diverse people engaging with it, and hopefully other MAG members from other groups will also join who might not have been working on gender before. So it's kind of like a call to other people to actually also come in and learn on this one.
Thank you, Chennai. Any further comments or questions on that BPF before we go to the last one? Raquel, you have the floor.
And just to complement, thank you, Lynn, to also concur with your comments regarding the importance of having the consultant as soon as we can. Being in the work of the BPF for the past 3 years now, it's really important to have the support in an early stage. Now that we are almost finished with the part of the workshop selection and so on, this is the next big sprint within the MAG work, and we've done already the work we could with the meetings and shaping this document collaboratively. Luckily, we have a supporting from the community and from members that are really willing to know MAG members and MAG members that are willing to put this forward, but having the consultant to streamline and to really push the work forward, it's going to be important. Thank you.
Thank you, Raquel. Maria, you have the floor.
Yes, only as a final complementing, I'm Maria Paz, representing civil society, also co-facilitating the gender PPF. Only in order to give you like more logistic approach of where we are in the process of the work of the BPF, we have had so far 2 meetings. We're in the process of feeding this collaborative document that my colleagues were mentioning. And we aim to identify subtopics of work in this broad topic that Chennai described so well at the beginning. And the idea is to recruit also more people interested in each one of these specific subtopics in order to organize task force for each one of these topics. So we will provide an update on that, and maybe it will be good if we can share broadly with the community in order to find the right people to feed this work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria. Not seeing any other hands up in the speaking queue. Let's move to the last BPF, artificial intelligence. I always get the order wrong, but I think it's Internet of Things, big data, and artificial intelligence.
Okay, thanks, Lynn, for giving me the floor. My name is Titti Cassa, Government Stakeholder Group. So I'll give you a short update about the BPF on IoT, big data, and artificial intelligence. Similar to last year, the BPF's focus is on where the three technologies are used together in an internet context. As an example, when IoT devices generate data, which then they are analyzed with the use of artificial intelligence machine learning technologies, or is considering cases when data are collected by social platforms that are analyzed by machine learning technologies. So while last year the BPF discussed more on best practice to facilitate the stakeholder dialogue on issues pertaining to the three technologies, IoT, big data, and artificial intelligence, this year the BPF intends to focus on making use of the technologies to address societal challenges. So starting from the chart that has been agreed by the MAG, the BPF has discussed the overarching narrative for the work on 2019 that is entitled Enhancing Justified Trust in IoT, Big Data, and AI to stimulate their use to address societal challenges that otherwise would be difficult to address. The work plan for 2019 has been structured in 5 phases. The first phase, that is almost finished, was identifying the number of priority policy challenges and also to launch the survey to collect inputs from the community. The survey has been just launched and it will be active until the 30th of June, and the submission will be included in the first draft of the how-to report. Then the second phase that is just started will be about discussing on policy challenges and also on best practice to address these policy challenges. Then we will have to prepare the report, that is the third phase. We'll have the workshop to in Berlin at the IGF 2019, and then the publication, the final output. So the work actually is coordinated by 4 volunteers that are me. Also there is Alex Cominus, Michael Nelson, Martin Botterman, and that's it. And there is Wim that is helping us as a stakeholder. We had 6 virtual meetings so far. The next one will be on the 17th of June. I think we all think that stakeholder participation is the key for the success of the BPF. So we need further outreach, and so we invite you to participate to the BPF, and we also invite the NRIs to be involved in this one, in this BPF. As last thing, I want to just mention the policy question that have been pointed out so far, that have been divided in 3 clusters that are trust in IoT, big data, and high application to address societal challenges, and best practice to enhance trust. Then the second cluster is referring to using the 3 technologies, IoT, big data, and high, to achieve positive policy outcomes, and also best practice to stimulate the uses of these 3 technologies to address challenges. And then the third cluster is about a policy question pertaining to the collection and use of data generated over internet, and also the related best practice to address them. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments or questions for that? I like the fact that you concluded with the sort of 3 policy areas or policy questions you're actually addressing, and certainly with anything that we might be bringing forward to the high-level multi-stakeholder leaders meeting. would be obviously critical that we pull in work from any of the intersessional activities, and that obviously includes anything that the NRIs might be doing as well in some of their sessions. Maria, is that an old hand, or are you? Maria, you have the floor.
One. Regarding this topic, I just want to share with the BPF in AE and IoT that there is a recent initiative from the World Economic Forum to create several kind of advisory councils, and they are touching several of these topics. There is one specifically in artificial intelligence, another one in IoT, and I think that it will be very good to find a way to connect with them. I am in touch with some of them. I am part of the IoT council, so I will be happy to facilitate that communication in the case of there is not existent link, because I think that they are very interested and they should take advantage of all the good work that is being done by this BPF, and I am not sure that at this stage they are totally aware of how much these BPF have been working in the last time. So I think that will be very good to find the ways to collaborate. Thank you.
And I think that would be helpful. Thank you, Maria. Any other comments, reflections on any of the 4 individual BPFs or on BPFs in general? I think one of the things we need to do with the BPF process is maybe as we advance through the year, start to get a sense of what work the BPF think they might do or continue doing going forward, and have that documented so that it was there and ready for the incoming MAG. We actually did that last year, I think, but I think a lot of these practices we need to sort of institute as kind of standard operating practice so that there's an almost seamless transition from one MAG to the other. So we should probably look at the BPF processes and make sure that somewhere in those processes there is kind of a requirement that in the final stages that there's a recommendation for future work. The future work, by the way, doesn't need to be that the BPF continues. It could be that the work is ready to move to other places, or some pieces of the work should move into another activity or another entity or another organization. But something which says, we've done this piece of work and here's some substantive next steps. Okay, well, let's move to the next agenda item then, which is the overview of the workshop proposal evaluations and thematic track formation. Yesterday I covered, again in the open consultation, I think the process we were working towards this year with respect to preparation of the core of the annual meeting. And I think what we'd like to do today is invite the 3 thematic working groups to talk about their proposal for the workshops within their tracks. If you have recommendations or thoughts on flows, if you have any other kind of important scheduling advice you think is important for the secretary to understand as they go forward, that would be a critical time to lay it out as well. It would also be helpful if, as you went through your work, I know we were all looking for kind of cross-cutting issues or horizontal issues. If you identified some of those in your work, it would be good to call those out, and we can either spend a few minutes on them now or set them aside, because I think there's some perhaps natural candidates for some main sessions if in fact it's a substantive cross-cutting issue. So we really do want to hear from the MAG members that were not part of those thematic working groups in terms of how all this sounds and feels to you. Again, I think we've been quite clear that we're not expecting sort of a rerun of the process, because as a MAG member, if you weren't part of that thematic working group, you're very unlikely to have reviewed yet another 100 odd proposals. But I mean, again, there's a lot of value in being close to, but maybe just even slightly outside of the process. So I do want people to think critically through this and see if there's anything that you think is missing from the perspective of kind of our daily global views as well. So again, with that, is there anybody who really wants to go first, or shall we go in the Paul, digital inclusion? Oh, Ben's put his hand up.
Just as I prepare, is it helpful for me to basically repeat the intervention I gave yesterday, which summarized the process we took and the recommendations we had to the Secretariat and for a cross-cutting workshop? Or are you looking for me to talk through each of the 20 workshops? Or I'm happy to go over and repeat what I did yesterday as a way to kick off discussion, but I didn't know if that would be repetitive or if you wanted more or something different.
Yeah, so I think, I don't think we're expecting people to go through every one of the workshops, but something which says this, and maybe you can do a little bit of the process again, although I think we've gone through the process on our MAG call of 2 weeks ago plus yesterday, so I wouldn't do a lot in the process. If you have a question or you need input or feedback from the MAG, then certainly that. If there's specific kind of scheduling advice for the Secretariat, I guess we could do it in the meeting here, or you could easily send an email or talk to them. I think the more substantive thing is the content and the topics, the policy questions, and sort of flow. So I would, I think, suggest that we spend a little more time in terms of I think there were kind of natural groupings for a lot of the workshops that were in the track. So if you talk about what those natural groupings were, what were the key topics that were within them, or key policy questions, and then any, if you were able to get to any meta-level policy questions, or again, any cross-cutting issues, those would be the ones that were really, but if people could put their remarks more towards the content and the substance of the proposals, I think that would be more appropriate. And really appreciate Paul going first. Actually, Digital Inclusion Working Group has led us through much of this process, and specifically with Paul's support and co-facilitation here as well. So, Paul, you have the floor. Maria, sorry, was that an old hand up now? Okay, Paul, you have the floor.
Thank you, Lynn. Paul Rowney. So I'm speaking on behalf of our working group, and I'm hoping they're going to chip in as we go along. It's been a very collective effort, and we had a late night meeting last night. I think we closed the building around 8 o'clock, and I think we set off the alarm on the way out. So we have something, I don't know if we can display it, but I don't know if we can get it up there. Can we display our
there
document?
are some slides that...
Yeah, we have a Word document that we sent through to Eleanor that I think shared with...
I'm sure Eleanor is on top of getting it up.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so we don't want to repeat what was discussed at the face-to-face. We went through a process of shortlisting. We looked at the advice of the Secretariat, looking at the top-rated workshops and filling any gaps. We've basically got 5 main thematical areas that we've ordered the workshops on, which are access, affordability and infrastructure, local content and multilingualism, skills, education and jobs, social inclusion, and governance and policy. So you'll see the workshops are ranked in those orders, starting with access, affordability and infrastructure. And this will feed into our flow diagram, which is at the end. So we just want to also note that there were 106 workshop proposals, and we can't accommodate everybody. So we apologize. We would have wanted to have accommodated everybody, but of course it's not practical. So in the document here, you'll see we have 20 workshops in the first table, plus 1 tutorial. We'll explain that in a little bit. We have 2 workshops that are in a so-called waiting list that we feel are strong in their own right, that could be accommodated or not, but we can explore that later. One key thing we want to mention is we did relook the merger suggestions of the top 16 ranked workshops, and on further investigation we've determined that those workshops are strong in their own right and they're different enough that we don't feel that we should be merging top 16 with top 16 workshops. So there is a proposed merger between workshop 200, which was ranked 13, and workshop 204, that was ranked 30. They're very similar, both only ones in the top 16, and there's a possibility that it is actually the same organizer of the 2 workshops, but it brings a gender aspect to the discussion, and that's basically the rationale of that merger. So we can glance through this. We didn't circulate it to the general MAG yet, because it still is provisional, but depending on the thought processes here, we can share it for the MAG to dig into it deeper. But we didn't want to set any unnecessary expectations prior to firming this up. So you see as we go through, we have 5 workshops on access, affordability and infrastructure. We have 3 on local content and multilingualism, 3 on skills, education and jobs. We have 4 on social inclusion, and each of those focus on a different specific of social inclusion, disability, gender and youth. And then the remaining 5 workshops are governance, overarching policy, and the one I spoke about, which is a 30-minute tutorial, this is a cross-cutting workshop. It's only 30 minutes, and our thought is that this could be tagged on into the lunch or something, so it wouldn't necessarily affect the program. It's quite short. It is a tutorial. So we have a strong feeling we can fit it in the program without taking one of the 90-minute slots. And the next table shows the 2 in the parking lot, so to speak. They bring different aspects, particularly around geographic stakeholder and issue balancing. But they were not ranked so high, and there were other the workshops in the top 20 are stronger from the evaluation, but we still feel that if they can be fitted in somewhere, we should try and accommodate those. There's some other workshops that have been brought to our attention that we're looking into. One is workshop 256, which is a workshop from Poland. It seems to be a government workshop. Taking into account they are our host next year, we feel it quite important to bring the host country into the IGF as much as possible. So we want to find a way to see how we could accommodate that workshop. There's a thought that it could be accommodated as an open forum, so it's something we're just putting out there for thought. There's a workshop 301, which is on IoT, that we're looking for possible mergers. IoT is not that covered so deeply in the other workshops, so we're seeing if that can be accommodated as a possible merger or somewhere else in the program. So there's a couple of tags at the end, basically, of the list. But right now, what we have and what we're presenting to the MAG is our top 20 recommended workshops, plus the tutorial, 30-minute tutorial, and the 2 in the waiting list. So I'm going to allow others in the working group to add anything if they want to, and then open the floor for comments. Thank you.
First, there are additional members from the thematic working group that would like to comment? Susan?
Thank you, Chair. Susan Chalmers and TIA. I just wanted to thank Paul for all the work that he's done to undertake the organization of this list. And in terms of the thematic flow, one of the ideas was that this would be almost in the OSI model, so starting with access and then building up the stack was one idea. So I just wanted to mention that for context, but otherwise it's been a pleasure to work with the group through this process, which was not easy, but I think we have a good result at the end of the day.
It's the richness of these global groups. Was there, just a question, wait, was there sort of an expectation that all the access, affordability, and infrastructure workshops there would come first in the program, and then there really was a full physical flow? I just wanted to make sure that was clear. Jutta, you have the floor.
Thank you, Lynn, for giving me the floor. First, I would also like to thank Paul and the group for this concise and precise selection of workshop proposals. I would like also to refer to the issue of Internet of Things that was mentioned, like it was not as well represented as you thought it would be. We had the same experience in the security and safety group, and I do think that, as we see from the best practice forum on Internet of Things, big data and AI, this is an issue that is also related to the data governance, I would say. So probably we could see Internet of Things as a cross-cutting issue and try to address it not only in the three main theme tracks, but in an additional session. Thank you.
Thank you, Jutta. If there aren't any other comments, I think we turn it back to Paul to see whether or not there's any additional feedback or input. And of course, it's open to MAG members as well for comments of clarity or question. Carlos, you have the floor.
On Jutta's comment, there is a dynamic coalition on Internet of Things. Maybe that would be the way to cover it in the IGF.
No, that's a very good point, too. I think it depends on whether or not we think about it as a main session with a full separate slot and focus. I'm just going to start a list here of kind of the possible cross-cutting issues that are suggested. But that's a good thing. It's actually quite an active, dynamic coalition. Any other comments from MAG members? Paul, anything?
Nothing really to add. So we just wait to hear back on how we move forward. And at the relevant time, we can circulate this document.
So I do have one more question. I know it on one of our earlier MAG calls, you'd said there was some discussion within the group whether or not you started with this sort of flow or whether it was reversed and you started with the governance and policy on the end. And is this a final recommendation, or is that still an open question?
Okay, to respond to that, what we see on the display is our proposed way forward. Basically, the thought behind that is by starting with access, affordability, infrastructure, we're actually raising policy issues that can then carry on later into the flow. So our proposed way of the structure of the flow would be as displayed there. And that gives some sense of the ordering of the program and when the workshops, how the workshops would fit into the program.
Timea?
Good morning, everyone. Timea Schutter from ICC Basis. Regarding this flow, what I wanted to underline it. Although we are starting with access and building up on content and skills and inclusion to arrive to governance and policy discussions, we just want to make it clear that we don't think that any of these baskets are more important or need to be the first one or the last one. So there is an arrow there just to indicate of how we're ordering this, because in our mind there is a logic to it, but that doesn't mean that any of these components are more important than the other. So I just wanted to make that clear. And the other thing that I wanted to also recognize that we are conscious that there's speakers that might have conflicts, there might be other issues. So just to know, and not for the Secretariat, that we don't expect that it's going to be 100% this way. We're proposing going forward, but we are conscious of the limitations. Thank you.
Thank you, Timea. I actually like a lot the flow, and I actually don't think anybody would assume one was more. I suspect any position one might have on what you think is more important is probably what you do in your day job than anything else, and not the graphic on it. But I think for me it really crystallizes the fact, and again, I always keep in mind the fact that the number one criticism we hear about the IGF is that it's a talking shop, and it's obviously it's not that, it's much more than that, but I think this shows how all these different pieces, or the other one is it's too broad, there's always so many different things in the IGF, and it's hard to get a sort of sense of what you're trying to do. And I think these graphics actually show the kind of linkage in the relationship, and that they build, and they can all, and do all ultimately support really critical questions. So, I personally like that a lot. Final call for any other questions from MAG members. I keep checking for those MAG members that are online as well to see if there's a hand up there, although they would be using the speaking queue as well. But if you are participating online and you have any questions or thoughts, then please do come in. Otherwise, we'll move to the next one, and thank very much. This goes for all of the thematic working groups. I know from personal past experience and how much work it is. There were days when we were all reviewing 200 and 250 and 300 proposals. But I think the proposals are actually getting, or the reviews and the process is getting even more in-depth as we actually really look to ensure that we're building a cohesive program, a focused program, and really trying to focus on policy questions. So I want to thank all the working groups for all of the very thorough effort. And I'm not sure which working group is going next. So I guess Jutta, you?
I do think Eleonora has already put up the slides, so probably I can start. Ben, would that be fine with you? If security goes on, or would you like to go first?
Next.
Okay.
Sorry, I was
thank
trying
you.
to point from you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, also the security group had a meeting yesterday in the evening, and to be honest, it was the security group who set off the alarm, so funnily enough. So as you may be aware from the communication on the list, security group decided to discuss potential mergers only face-to-face yesterday. And so we started with the preliminary selection we already had and approved the 20 proposals that were first selected, but with some condition. And if you could put up the maybe we start with a flow chart, because that would be the easiest thing to follow. Just a second. So I can explain a bit. So okay, we can start on the second page, Eleonora. I can click? Okay, that's fine. So you will see the list of proposals, and we became aware that in Security and Safety Group we had the first two places of the overall rank of all the workshop proposals. If you look at the list, the place 1 and place 2, that were the highest ranking out of all workshop proposals. And then it goes further down the list. And you can see that we had identified workshop 85, which is the last on this page. It's misinformation, trust, and platform responsibility. And then the next one, ranking directly after that, was coping in an era of misinformation, who is responsible. And the group decided that we would only look into mergers if the merger would not lead to broaden the focus of a session, but to bring a closer look into a certain issue. So these two were really overlapping. They also were overlapping in the policy questions they had phrased, and therefore the group suggested to merge these two sessions, and also having in mind that 85 applied for a 90-minute session slot and 268 applied for 60 minutes, so we thought it would be feasible to merge these without losing the focus of the session. For the other workshops on the list of the first 20, we thought that there was no room for merger because the approaches of the workshops, also they address somehow similar issues, was just too broad to bring in to bring 2 or 3 of them together. And going further down the list, so that leaves us with 19 that are now approved, in consideration of 2 of them being merged. So that would be 19 out of 20 that we had first selected. Then for filling the gaps, we had identified, on suggestions from members of the group, 4 additional workshops. And given the fact that we got the feeling among around, I think it was 86 workshops we had to assess, that the Internet of Things was a little bit underrepresented under the first 20. So we decided to accept workshop 307, Transparency and Control for the Internet of Things, so that we end up with a list of 20. And that left us with the 3 additional workshops that we considered might be accepted if there is space, because among these first 20, we still have 4 that applied only for 60-minute slots, so there might be space. And then we took a deeper look into 150 and proposal 22, which are both dealing with hacking hate speech, with hate speech online. So one was called Hacking Hate Speech Online, a multi-stakeholder approach, and the 22 was named Tackling Hate Speech, Future Regulation of Intermediaries. And we thought that both of them were did not address diversity as well as it should be in such an issue. So the suggestion was to merge the 2 of them, and then also advise the proposers that they would definitely need to add the perspective from the technical community, and that should be done with respect to also geographical diversity, because proposal 22 only had organizers and speakers from the Western European and others group. 150 was a bit more diverse, but not as diverse as the group would like it to see. And because we understand that it would be difficult to merge these 2 sessions and to give the additional advice of improving diversity, especially in regard of the technical community perspective, 2 members of the group volunteered to guide through this merging process, which is thankfully Maria Paz-Canales and Silvia Cadena. With the technical community background, they could good help. to improve this. Then we had discussions about workshop 413, Human Values and Internet Protocols, because some of the group thought this would be an additional issue that was not covered exactly, although it's related to the Internet of Things somehow also. In the end, we decided to dismiss this proposal for the time being, and the group went home with some homework, because we still thought that if there might be room for one additional workshop, each of the members should have a look at those that ranked high but still are not among these provisionally accepted workshop proposals. And then if we get a signal from the Secretariat that there would be space for one more workshop, we would decide among these favorites of the members of the group which one could then be accepted. One thing that just came in when I was speaking, we also gave to the group the task to look for cross-cutting issues, and a suggestion was that jurisdiction that is among these workshops could probably be a cross-cutting issue. And I wanted just to click once more to give you a view on the flowchart that was produced based on the first model that Paul Roney had produced. We tried to also sort the workshop that were selected, and you can see now that the two that we in two groups or two sub-themes that we identified for merger are marked with this orange space around them. And you will also see from the flowchart that difficulty that I had been speaking about yesterday, that security, safety, stability and resilience is really a very broad theme, and it was difficult to group the workshop proposals under this broad main theme. But still we do think, like it was said by Timea, we don't think that the one on the left side are the highest and the more important than on the left side. It's just that this would provide for a good flow within the whole program, going from security over the stability and resilience issues, and then ending up with the safety issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Jutta, and the working group. It would be helpful if in the slide the little blue boxes that are under the workshop groupings were larger, because I think that really helps in terms of see where the topics and issues are as well. Just a real nit, but I mean, it would. I'm actually finding them useful. But
I could read them out just to give you an impression. So we would start on the left side with the cyber attacks, somehow related also to the term internet kill switch. Then going over to international norms and jurisdiction, and the second would be, or the third would be internet protocols and internet resources. Then coming to the Internet of Things, trust and accountability together with democratic values. Then we have kind of a block with misinformation, fake news, and the next one, freedom of expression and hate speech. Coming to child safety and online sexism on the right side.
But so it actually goes like this, yes, in terms of reading it. Okay, good job. But that's very helpful. Are there any, first, any other comments from other working group members? I know this was a big lift in particular because, you know, there really are 4 very significant areas in the track. Are there any comments, thoughts, questions from MAG members to the members of this working group? I think the titles are quite good for a lot of the workshops too. In both of the last 2 presentations, it was pretty easy to quickly get a kind of sense of the flow and the perspective just from the titles. So I think the community is doing a good job at finding something which is really interesting, really clear, and concise as well, so.
I know I've said that before, but I really do think that asking the community to phrase these policy questions was very helpful for the community as well, because you can see the relationship between the title of the workshop and the policy questions they phrased.
No, and the hope is that with those policy questions, of course, that it actually gives guidance to the people that participate in the workshops. Clearly, the organizers are paying attention to them, but that it also kind of drives the discussion in the room as well. So, the people that participate feel that there's a purpose and a focus, and have actually participated in a meaningful way to move something forward. Is there anybody else who wants to make a comment? Yes, Nebojša.
As a member, Nebojša Rego, MAG member government stakeholders group. As a member of this group, I want to thank to Jutta for her leadership and for all effort that she put in this exercise. I have one general remark about the proposals we received yesterday, which I shared with the group last night. I think that compared to last year, diversity was on a much lower level overall than previous year, and it's too bad that some of the proposals, actually one of the proposals that we suggested to get improvement and to be conditionally accepted, scored well on policy issue, but it was very low on diversity, which lowered the total score. What are the reasons for overall lower level of diversity? I really don't know, but it really, at least in this group of workshop proposals, it was both lacking diversity, I mean, in all aspects of diversity, regional diversity when it comes to the stakeholders group, gender balance, I would say in all aspects of diversity. That's just general remark which would maybe, let's say, be of interest for the next year when defining the call for proposals to emphasize that really diversity is an important issue that is paid attention for it when evaluating the proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Nebojša. Very important comments and certainly a very important consideration in everything we do. So I think trying to understand why or what triggered that would be helpful. Jutta, you have the floor.
Yeah, just to underline what Nebojša just said, I would be really interested to learn from the other two groups where they had the same experience with regard to diversity. I do think we made an effort to ask for more diversity, and it was very elaborate, the whole system, how we asked for diversity, and then when we end up see that, of course, many people only ticked, yes, I address diversity in regard of gender, geographic region, a stakeholder group, and so on, and they not really did address diversity. So kind of like we had overdrawn it with asking for more diversity, and now we end up with the opposite. At least we can say that for the security and safety group, and I was wondering whether it was the same experience for the other groups. And then I do think the working group on workshop proposal process should take that in consideration and then try to find a solution for next year's process.
Thank you, Jutta. Maria?
Yeah, just to add an additional point of what Jutta just was mentioning, I think that it's not really only important to clarify more, like internally the process, but also to be able to better communicate to the community in general this consideration in the workshop evaluation, because I have the feeling, maybe it's not very founded in concrete evidence, but I have the feeling that this is the result of like people not being clear on how the workshop are being evaluated, and thinking that at the end, if the topic is interesting, if the speakers are appealing, the workshop will be conditionally accepted anyway. So they are not like putting the same effort in addressing the diversity from the very beginning, thinking that will be time for fixing this later. And I think that like to have more clear guidelines in what is the internal procedure for evaluation and being able to openly communicate this to the community will necessarily impact the quality of the future proposal. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you, Maria. Sylvia?
Hello. Okay. Sorry. Silvia Cadena, Technical Community. I just wanted to add the point that the exercise of thinking about what the proposals don't have necessarily in common was also interesting when considering mergers or how to address any mentoring that can be provided to workshop proposers, right? So one of the things that we discussed was how instead of trying to look at the similarities between proposals, that we could discuss what is actually different between them, even if they are kind of covered in similar focus, similar areas, and then approach the organizers and request them to focus on that particular difference and give more depth to the conversation around that particularity that they were discussing. But that will require, I guess Maria Paz and I will be experimenting a little bit with that when we support this merger that came out of the group. But I guess it is would be worth it, I guess, for the working groups to look at the different proposals and see what specific feedback can be given to the ones that are finally approved, to tell them, look, if what we are looking at is a more concise, in-depth discussion on a particular issue, look at the other proposals that are in your flow, right, in your little bucket where you were placed, and see if any of them are touching on things that you already think you are covering in your workshop, so that you don't repeat things that the others are doing, without thinking about mergers or anything like that, but probably trying to make the organizers aware of the rest of the program, so that this intention of being more focused, actually everybody is on the same page. So I just don't know exactly how we could do that, but I guess it's part of the communication that the Secretariat will have to send to the approved proposals when that step happens. But I think it's worth the time to just pick and figure out, okay, you have 6 speakers talking about, I don't know, cyber norms and human rights, and in the other workshop there is one that is touching on that issue. Why don't you just kind of drop that issue because the other workshop is going to cover it, and then use your 60 minutes or your 90 minutes to go deeper into the one policy question, or just to try to help them bring focus. Because a lot of the sessions are, well, not a lot, some of the sessions are very generic, and it's like if they are trying to solve the problem all by themselves. And it could be, it's just a cube, right? It's sides of the discussion. So if we could encourage them to look at the rest of the sessions approved, even across other things, maybe that will help us to prepare people to participate also in the topic entailing sessions, and how that flow actually guides the process. And I've been taking notes about how, for example, the the way we collected the data on the application form about diversity actually shows on the evaluation process. So if they have a different understanding of what diversity means, and they tick, yes, I am addressing diversity on gender just because they have one woman in the panel, right? Then, or in the session, then that not necessarily fit with what we described. So maybe there are issues on the form of how you capture the information so that it's kind of verified, and then it doesn't give us that yes I did, yes I did, yes I did, and then you go back and look and no they didn't, no they didn't, no they didn't, which happens in a few workshops. But that's for the post-mortem of the process and the form and all of that, so for later. Thank you, Lynn.
You know, Sylvia, I have a follow-up question. I mean, thank you for that. But, and to Sylvia and others, would it be helpful to share the policy questions that are part of the approved workshops with all of the workshop organizers so that very quickly they could see if there was some, I know it's easy enough to extract the policy questions because the secretary has done that, but maybe there's an opportunity to take those policy questions, share them with the other workshop organizers just so that they're kind of generally aware, and maybe that's a lightweight way to do what you're suggesting as
well.
Yes,
I think that the policy questions are an excellent way to get started and see what topics are discussed. And maybe in some of the sessions, especially the ones that have a panel format, where specific panelists are clearly saying, I'm going to talk about X, then those two fields could help. But the thing is, it would be very difficult to send like a generic email saying, please take a look at this, right? So I guess maybe a good thing to do, for example, to use that generic email and with the flows, with that flow, and say, look for your workshop number in that little bucket, and then look for the proposals on that bucket and check their policy questions. Something really concrete to help them initiate those conversations. And I think it's also probably would be very important if we could try, although we mentioned this in the meeting in Geneva, I think in the first one in January, if we could try to do a little bit of a promotional campaign to ask speakers and organizers to go in the IGF website and update their profiles, their community profiles, so that the information that is there is the actual one. And that if there are profiles that are duplicated, to try to identify with the Secretariat which one is the valid one. Some organizations, some speakers were listed under the wrong one, but it's because they have different old profiles in the system. So maybe that is something also, if we run, I don't know, like a let's clean our database of contacts thing before the IGF, we might end up with in a better position to actually run the stats on diversity and to have better information for the speakers, you know, the right work titles, the right organizations where they work, and not things from 5 years ago. Thank you.
So let me just try and quickly answer. I think between the conversation we had, it sounds like there's a suggestion that we prepare a package that would go to the organizers of those workshops that are approved, which might actually give a little intro to the track overall. I think the flow chart is the 2 flow charts we've seen. We're still waiting for the 3rd presentation, but include the flow charts and maybe a separate addendum of the policy questions. I mean, it would make them feel that they were actually part of an ongoing discussion and a full flow, and understand what was coming before and what was coming afterwards, which I would think would actually be a good feeling and a good process for them as well. And maybe as part of that, we ask them to ensure that you know, the profiles are up to date and clean or something like that. But the real benefit is in saying, this is the thematic track, this is where your workshop fits in, these are the other workshop organizers, and these are the policy questions, and if there's something else specific we want to ask them to do, that we should think about that. So I guess the question is whether or not that's something the Secretariat can support and pull together, or whether or not it starts from the thematic working groups and Secretariat